Hi, everyone. My name is Cesar Lopez. I'm the Director of Education here at Hope, a nonprofit based in Georgia. I'm very excited to get to welcome you all today to this year's virtual college fair with Univision. So just to get to tell you a little bit about myself, I graduated from the College of Worcester over 2 years ago with a degree in sociology. The College of Worcester is in Worcester, Ohio, just about an hour south of Cleveland, Ohio. But the last time I was in your shoes would have been in 2017 when I graduated from Berkmark High School in the metro Atlanta region of Georgia. For today's presentation, I'll get to talk to you all a little bit about college admissions and helping you prepare for your college search and applications. So thank you for joining me. We'll get started. Alrighty. So like I mentioned, welcome to today's presentation. So today's presentation is broken up into 4 simple parts. The first one, things you need to know before you start your college search process. Second portion on things you need to take into consideration when building your college list. The third portion on helping you prepare for your actual college applications. And the last part, a focus on the college entrance exams, which are part of your college application. So like I mentioned, first section, what criteria is important for you to know when you're building your list of colleges? There are 5 main things that I tell students to take into consideration, and here on the slide are the first 2. But overall, you need to take into consideration the type of college and where exactly you envision yourself being in the near future, either as a full-time student or a part-time student if your plans are a little bit different. Things to take into consideration when you're kind of figuring out what type of college you're looking for. It's really important to know what kind of program you're trying to explore. So these would be your majors. Every college has different offerings. So, for example, if we're comparing a public institution to a private institution, public colleges tend to have a lot more to offer. They tend to be larger universities or larger colleges, while your private institutions tend to offer a little bit less. Sometimes, if you don't want to go into a 4-year degree program, right, the college you might be looking into would be a 2-year community or technical college that has more career oriented programs to help you prepare to get into a career right after graduation. The second main thing to take into consideration, and what I would argue is actually one of the most important things to take into consideration, is what is the total cost of attendance to each of the colleges you're adding to your list. Most of the time, students prioritize exploring their favorite institutions and falling in love with 1 or 2, and that's their goal to get into. And they fail to realize that paying for college right is something that you should be taking into consideration from the start and not necessarily getting into college and then trying to figure out how to pay for college after you're already in. So, knowing what the total cost of attendance is will be really important. We'll get to talk about this portion a little bit more in the second presentation, so make sure to check that one out. Like I mentioned, right, what's really important to take into consideration when you're exploring the types of colleges and kind of paying attention to what the total cost of attendance is, it's really what you want to explore, whether that's a major or a minor, dual degree, or specializing in something that you can create for yourself at a particular college. Like I mentioned, larger institutions tend to have more to offer, more room for you to explore. Private institutions have amazing curriculums, but they may be limited on what they can offer you. And ultimately, one of the things that we'll cover into a lot larger depth in this presentation is what are the admissions requirements and what do you need to know about your college applications and what college admissions counselors look at when deciding what students will take part in their next incoming class. So those are the 5 key areas that I recommend you look into. But to dive a little bit deeper into the types of colleges, location, and size, we'll kind of take into consideration other small things you might not even think about. For example, if you know that you thrive in small classroom environments and you really want to be able to build connections with your professors, choosing a college with a smaller faculty to student ratio might be ideal for you. Sometimes, if you kind of think on movies and TV shows that you watch, you can kind of imagine the classrooms that have multiple steps and seats that sit around 300 students. Some large institutions, 4-year colleges, offer you that experience. But if you know that you'll do better in a smaller classroom environment where you get to connect with your peers, your teachers' assistants, and professors, the smaller classroom might be ideal for you. For example, for me, when I went to the College of Worcester, my classroom size typically ranged from somewhere between 10, 15. My largest class did have 90 students, but 90 students is not as large as a 300 student classroom size. Having that small classroom size for me allowed me to build personal relationships with my professors, allowed me to take some of them on as mentors throughout my 4 years in college, and allowed me to take advantage of opportunities that I may not have had in a much larger classroom setting where I didn't get to build that connection with my professor. Another thing to take into consideration, especially if you're choosing to leave your community, right, is whether or not you're going to a college that is in a rural or urban environment. Things to consider for me, for example, right, when I left Metro Atlanta to go to the College of Worcester, which is in a rural community in Ohio, knowing the town-gown relationship, whether or not the college had positive relationships with communities members outside of the campus was important to me. Knowing what the community had to offer off campus, so I did not just have to stay on campus the entire time, was also really important. If you don't drive or don't see yourself taking your car to your college campus, knowing what the public transportation is like will probably be essential to helping you get a move in and around the community. So for some of you, what might also be important is the diversity, not only the student body, but the community at large. And for some of you, also political parity, right? If you want to be in a community that shares predominantly similar political ideologies to you, right? I'm here in Metro Atlanta, predominantly Democratic area, right? And the community that I moved into was predominantly Republican conservative and kind of did shape my experience throughout my 4 years. Positive. Another thing to take into consideration when you're actually choosing the campus, especially if you're choosing to move out of state or live on campus, is knowing what the residential policies are like. Some colleges require you live on campus for the first year of your college experience, and that allows you to be in community with your peers. Others allowed you to decide from the start whether or not you'll be an on campus student or you'll commute. Some might not offer on campus housing, and it's only a commuter college, so everyone is coming from home and from their various communities to the college campus. Some universities have very large, very fancy dorms, others have much smaller and cozier accommodations. Some campuses have a variety of dining services, offer you on campus cafeterias, but also restaurants you can use your meal plans on. Others are probably limited in what they can offer you. And then lastly, maybe one of the things you're not thinking about right off the bat is employment opportunities. If you're not choosing to get a job through the college campus, what is offered or available to you around the campus so that you can have a job that can help you one stay on track of your educational expenses, but also give you income so that you can splurge on the things you want to do. Now, when we hone in on the college specifically, you want to be able to explore academic programs. It's fine if you don't know what you want to do. I know when I was in your shoes, I had a starting place, but I went through a whole wild journey of changing my majors before I settled on what I wanted to do. But one of the things you really should start doing is, even if you don't know where you want to start, explore what they have to offer. Like I mentioned, every college or university offers different programs. And even if they offer the same major, the classes will be different, the requirements will be different. And in some programs, you'll get to explore topics that might be more interesting to you than it would be at a different campus. So when you're exploring programs, a couple of things you need to know is how, like, kind of the terms or the lingo that's used when talking about academic programs. So your majors would be what you would want to specialize in, right? My major was in sociology. I love being chismoso. I love knowing how people as a community and a society work. So sociology was a good fit for me, right? Within that field specifically, you could have chosen a concentration and chosen to focus your time and energy on a particular area of that major, right? This might look a little bit different for other majors. For example, if you decided to get a degree in psychology, right, you could have probably focused in on social psychology, which would have been similar to sociology. Sometimes what's really easy for students who want to explore a lot, who want to get a degree in various things, but want to really just specialize on one and still dabble in other topics, would be knowing what minors and certificates are available at your college or university. For example, some of my friends majored in comp sci and math, but had minors in history or even theater and dance. So they got to, one, pursue their career interests, but also satisfy their personal passions, right? Some colleges offer you the ability to get a certificate. So on top of your degree, you'll have something else that allows you to show employers and people who are interested that you are certified in other areas. If you're a student who's interested in going to a specialized career like medicine or law, knowing what pre-professional tracks are available at a college is really important. Pre-health, pre-engineering, and pre-law are just a couple of examples. Typically in the US system, right? Unlike in Latin America, you don't go straight into a specialized career. You start with your 4-year degree and then go for a master's or a doctorate degree. Some colleges allow you to design your own thing. So, for example, if you go to a college that does not offer a degree in journalism, but you want to be a journalist and you want to specialize in that area, they'll allow you to build from what they do offer so you can still get the degree and the experience you want out of their college experience. Some will offer you the opportunity to get 2 degrees in a short amount of time. For example, at the College of Worcester, some students could have done a 3-2 program. So it would have been 3 years at the College of Worcester, 2 years at Case Western Reserve, and they would have been able to graduate in 5 years with 2 degrees instead of 6 or 7 years with those 2 degrees. And then ultimately, if you know that you want to travel, right, and you want to incorporate that into your experience, or you might be open to the idea of traveling, you can begin exploring what study abroad opportunities they offer. It's never too early to start beginning those conversations. So even from the moment you get on campus, you can let them know that you're interested in studying abroad. You can do part of your studies in a different country. I've had friends who have gone to Chile, who have gone to Spain or Germany, and been able to take a semester abroad and really get a lot of their classes in for their graduation requirements while being able to experience a different culture outside of the US. Now, other things that impact your college experience, right? And here I won't go too much into depth, is you want to pay attention to what services they offer and then what they have to offer you in terms of student life experiences. So, services, we can be focusing in on academic, right? Do you know that you need help in writing, right? And developing those skill sets? Do they have a writing center? Do you know that you're going to specialize in a STEM degree? So, something in science, technology, engineering, or math? And would you like that additional support? Do they offer you a STEM center? If you want to take advantage of other services, is kind of figuring out from the start, do they offer tutors, peer mentors? If you're a student who speaks English as the second language, do they offer ELL support services? If you're a student who in high school has disability or learning accommodations, you'll want to also explore that in your search process to make sure that the college will have what you need to succeed in their learning environment. You want to kind of be aware of what they offer in terms of employment and wellness services. So whether or not they make it easy to connect you to internships or research opportunities. What do they offer in terms of alumni groups? For example, at the College of Worcester, if you were a LGBTQI plus student or in that community, we had an alumni group that you can easily connect to folks who had already graduated from our institution and connect with them for employment or even mentorship opportunities. Now, in terms of wellness, something that might be really important for students, especially if you're going out of state, is knowing what they offer in terms of the services, like an on-campus clinic, counseling services. Some colleges and universities may offer insurance plans if you yourself don't have a health or medical plan. And in particular, for students who are a little bit more physically active, you might want to explore what their athletic facilities are like. Do you have a pool? Do you have a track? Do you have a gym? And what kind of equipment does your gym have? These might seem like minor things, right? That you might be like, why am I including these in the start of my search? But they can really shape your experience. And ultimately, right, outside of the class, what is available for you to get involved in? What are student organizations that the college campus has, right? And if they don't have what you're looking for, do they make it easy for you to create these opportunities right on campus? If you want to be a student involved in leadership opportunities, what does their student government look like? What opportunities are available on campus for you to get more intimately involved in your social environment? If you're athletic, how can you get involved in the official or even intramural sports teams? If you want to focus in on your professional development, right? How can you get involved in honor societies or professional organizations or even Greek life? So though that was a lot of things, a lot of different larger aspects and even minor things that you want to take into consideration in your college search. This really allows you to not only broaden your net, so you are able to cast a wider net when you're applying to colleges, but it also helps you choose intentionally where you're applying to. In this next section, I'll walk you more specifically through things you need to know when building your college list. When building your college list, you want to make sure, like I mentioned, right, you cast a wide net. You don't want to keep your list too small because you want to increase the opportunities of you getting into as many colleges and universities as you are equipped to apply to, right? So you don't want to, for example, just apply to one and put all your eggs in one basket because with the college admissions landscape right now, right, you're not always guaranteed an automatic offer of admissions. So by casting a wider net, right, and choosing colleges intentionally, you know that from the colleges that do offer you an offer of admissions, you'll enjoy the colleges and the experiences they offer, right? And it'll all just come down to who offers you the most financial aid. So it's a financially sound decision, and who offers you the academic and social experiences that you want to get the most out of your time in college. When you're building your college list, typically your school counselors or post secondary transition advisors will tell you to categorize your colleges into 3 categories: your safety colleges and universities, your match colleges and universities, and reach colleges and universities. So to break down what those terms actually mean here on the screen, we go a little bit more into depth into what those terms mean. But what's really important to know, right, for safety schools, you'll typically want to apply to 2 or 3 safety schools. These are colleges where your GPA and your SAT or ACT scores are well above the college average, typically above the 70th percentile. When we talk about safety schools, there's always this misconception that they're easy to get into, right? And that tends to be a negative or kind of a reputation that diminishes the value of the education these colleges offer. So it's really important to kind of reframe your mindset that yes, these colleges might be safety schools, taking into consideration your GPA and your scores, but that does not mean that the college itself is any less rigorous, any less competitive than the other schools that have higher academic requirements for you to get in terms of admissions. When we're talking about match in college universities, this is typically recommended you apply to 4 to 5. And these would be colleges where your GPA and your scores are right at the average, somewhere between the 25th and the 75th percentile of the students enrolled. And ultimately, reach colleges and universities are the ones that you typically hear about being the most competitive, right? Many students apply, very few get in. So these would be 1 to 2 colleges at minimum, right? Where your GPA and scores probably fall below the college or university averages, but you still want to shoot your shot, right? And see if you can get an offer of admissions from that university because they have something you value, whether that's an academic program, right? Whether that's a post-graduation opportunity that you really want to take advantage of, you still want to shoot your shot. Now, this might look like 10 schools. You don't necessarily need to apply to 10 schools. Just take into consideration, right, that you want to apply to more than one, more than 3. That way you're still casting a wide enough net when you're submitting your applications. All right, so here's an example of Georgia Tech, which is the Georgia Institute of Technology here in the state of Georgia. And there's something that most colleges will offer you if you know how to search for it. Most colleges release something that's called the Common Data Set, or the CDS. It's not always very clear on their website. It's not always like hyperlinked in their admissions page. But the Common Data Set shows you as a student, as a community member who's interested in the institution, the basic stats of the most recent class that they've admitted. So for example, when you look up on Google, Common Data Set plus Georgia Tech, you'll get the Common Data Set for, I think, the admission cycles of 2 years ago. What's really important with the data that you can access here is that it helps you see the scores or the basic stats of students who were admitted to Georgia Tech. And this would apply to any other college or university as well. For example, here on the screen, you'll know that most of the enrolled students scored somewhere between a 1370 on the SAT all the way up until a 1520. These tend to be the averages. Most students who apply to Georgia Tech had a GPA of a 4.0, but at minimum, most of the students had at least a 3.5 GPA in the group that was admitted. About 91% of the students who were admitted to Georgia Tech were in the top 10 of their high school graduating class, right? This will help you kind of figure out, these are just basic stats. There's a lot more in these common data sets, down from how many students applied to how many got in, to the number of students who were put on a wait list, and then the number of students who were accepted and got off of the wait list. This will tell you also demographics of their school in terms of gender, whether or not students are predominantly male or female at their college, whether or not students are predominantly white or of another racial or ethnic group at their college. It'll give you a lot of information. You'll just have to choose and parse through what's really important to you, right? Is it the academics, the rigor that you need to go overcome throughout your college application, or are you really wanting to explore diversity in the data that you're going through? But this is just an example, right? So the common data set, right, like I mentioned, isn't always easily available to you as a student. Sometimes colleges really post it on different portions of their website, or you'll just find the random PDF on a Google search result, right? That doesn't even link you directly to the college admissions page. If you can't find it, right, or you want to explore a second resource that houses similar information, one of the easiest tools to use that's accessible to everyone in the US is the College Scorecard. The College Scorecard is a resource that's sponsored by the Department of Education here in the US, and it offers you the ability to explore not only local, in-state, but also out-of-state colleges and universities. It allows you to explore by name, by zip code, searching by fields of study, or even a bunch of other options. When you're using this tool, for example, we can pull up similar information for Georgia Tech, and we can see how the U.S. Department of Education kind of classifies a university, right? Here they have on file that it's a 4-year college, so you'll be able to get your bachelor's degree, right? It's a public university in a city or urban environment, and they classify it as a large institution. Here at a glance, you can see that Georgia Tech has an 88% graduation rate, right? And the average annual cost is about $14,000 or $15,000 for an in-state student. And after you graduate, right, the average amount of money that you'll probably be earning with your degree from Georgia Tech is somewhere around $88,000, right? This is just a quick glance. But when you scroll down further into the page, you'll find more information about the cost of education at Georgia Tech, the graduation and retention rates at Georgia Tech, financial aid and the debt ratio, right? Typical earnings for their students, demographic information on their student body, and even more simplified information on the test scores and acceptance rate for their admissions office. So, being a nonprofit that works in Georgia, we also specialize working with students in our state. Another resource that is available if you are a student in Georgia in a similar some of your states, if you don't live in Georgia, might offer a similar thing. But here in Georgia, we have something called Georgia Degrees Pay, which is a resource similar to the college scorecard, but specific to the public institutions in our state. So here you can explore things like cost of attendance, your future earnings, and different categories or different aspects of student success. So here, for example, we're still using Georgia Tech as one of our examples, but here we're also comparing it to the University of Georgia, which is another competitive institution in our state. Here you're able to see the number of students enrolled at the undergraduate level, so students who are pursuing their bachelor's degree, which is their 4-year degree. You can see the number of students enrolled full-time, or the percentage of students enrolled full-time, down to the percentage of students living on campus. Here we can't really zoom in, but you'll also be able to see the race and ethnic demographic breakdown, down to the number of students who are receiving the federal Pell Grant, which will be in our second presentation, and the average GPA for freshman students amongst a bunch of other statistics and data available to you. So this website does a similar thing, but it hones in on our in-state institutions. Okay, so that was a lot. From down to what's important to take into your search, right? What are things that you need to take into consideration when you're actually building your final or ongoing list of colleges you're going to apply to. In this next portion, we'll walk through the major and minor components of college applications. So here, similar to my last graphic, right, there are 5 main things that we tell students to really take into consideration, right? Is letter recommendations, your high school transcripts, SAT and ACT exam results, your personal statement and essays, and then everything else that might be miscellaneous or specific to a college or university's application. So starting with the letter of recommendations, if you don't know what this is a part of the college application that asks you to provide the college, right? 1 or 2, sometimes even 3 specific individuals who can provide a letter of recommendation or a character reference about you as a student or in any particular context that they know you in. So this depends how many of these letters of recommendations you'll need, really depend on the college. Typically averages somewhere between 2 to 3 letters of recommendation, and they tend to be from core subject teachers or your counselor. So I'm talking about core subject teachers, these would be your teachers who are teaching you math, science, language arts or literature, social studies or history, and sometimes foreign language. This wouldn't always take into consideration your art teachers or music teachers, but some colleges do make an expectation and allow you to choose any teacher who's teaching you any one of the subjects offered at your high school. But some tend to be a bit more specific and specify core subject. If it's your counselor, it would typically be your assigned counselor who's required to write a letter of recommendation on your behalf. When you're looking for these letters of recommendation, one of the things that we'll go into today is something called a brag sheet. So you can learn about how you can help these individuals write you the best letter of recommendation possible. So you won't write it, you won't read it yourself, but you'll be able to provide them with additional information that helps them write a holistic letter about you. Typically, what's really important to know here is that every high school probably has their own policies or process to do this. But typically, we recommend that you at the latest, give your potential recommender a 2-week notice of when you need your letter of recommendation by. The more time you give them, though, the better. 1, because that gives your recommender more time to write you the letter, more time to be intentional with how they write your letter. Also, make sure that in case something comes up in their everyday work or personal life, they're still able to get your letter in on time. Some schools, though, specifically may require you to notify your recommenders the semester before. So this would be your spring semester of junior year, or even let them know at the start of the academic year, your senior year, that you intend to apply to certain colleges and would like their support with the letter of recommendation. Some schools don't have this requirement, and if they don't, at minimum, let them know 2 weeks before that you'll need a letter, but the more time, the better. When it comes to essays, the dreaded essays, I know everyone has different writing abilities and different comfort levels when it comes to writing academic or personal essays. But it's going to be really important for you to know what prompts to anticipate or how many essays to anticipate for each particular college you're applying to. Typically, this could range somewhere between 2 to 3 or even 3 to 5 essay responses. They all won't have the same instructions or the same word counts. So it's really important to know that some of these essays might be a personal statement, right? Some of these might just be a general response to a general topic or prompt. Some of these might be short answer responses or supplemental essays. But every college has their own thing going on. When we use certain sites, which I'll cover in a second, you'll know that you might be able to reuse some of your essays, or you can write one essay and that one essay will be sent to multiple institutions. But know that for the most part, colleges tend to even ask and throw in their own additional essays. So really important to begin as you're building your search list, right, going into each application and jotting down what the prompts are, how many essays you'll need. Because for some of these institutions, if they're asking you a similar prompt, right, or it's a question that's close enough to what you're already responding to, you're able to modify your existing essays and make sure that you use them across multiple applications so you don't spend too much time writing too many essays. All right, so here it's also going to be really important to make sure that you follow the instructions down to the last letter on how to send your high school transcript. Every college application is a little bit different depending on how the admissions team at a particular college or university processes high school transcripts. Some of them, especially like if you're using the Common App, which we'll go into in a second, will require that your college advisor or your guidance counselor or school counselor directly uploads the high school transcript for you on your behalf. So you don't necessarily handle either an unofficial or official copy of your transcript and uploading it yourself. Your guidance counselor or school counselor will do that for you. Other institutions in particular, if they don't use application sites like the Common App or the Coalition app and tend to go more the paper route or their own online form, may ask you to mail in a copy of your high school transcript, in which case you'll need to make sure you reach out to your school counselors in time so you can get one printed and one sealed and sent to the college. Your high school transcript at minimum includes all the information about your academic performance, but it also includes other things like your behavioral record, school profile, so the admissions counselors know a little bit about what your school offers in terms of courses and how they grade your classes and things like that. But one of the things that you'll pay attention to probably, or you'll focus your time on when looking at your high school transcript, is your GPA. Because when we're reading like the common data sets or the incoming class profiles for a college, you'll get to see what the average GPA is. And what something that's really important for you to know is that every college and university reworks your GPA to match their scoring. So for example, if you have a 4.0 and one of your friends has a 4.0, if you're in different school districts, your GPAs might be measured differently. For one of you, it might be unweighted, meaning there's no additional points added for the rigor of courses. And for some of you, it might be weighted. So they add additional points if you take honors or AP classes. So what college admissions counselors do is that they take the raw score for each of your classes and they calculate a whole new GPA, one that is unweighted for the most part. Here, it's also really important to note that the college applications will ask you about your extracurriculars. What are the things that you are involved in, both within your high school and outside of your high school in your broader community? These could be things like the clubs that you do, the sports that you do, any jobs that you've held, whether they're formal employments or not, even other things like informal forms of leadership opportunities, like you babysitting your siblings, or you helping your neighbors grocery shop once a week because they don't have a car, or you stepping in to help translate for neighbors who are applying to like government benefits or applying to jobs. Things that are not necessarily like a officer position in a student club or even a job like a checkers. Those are all things that the college application will ask you for so that the college admissions counselor gets to learn more about you as an individual outside of the academic context. Now, the essays, right? Like I mentioned, um, one of the great things about centralized application sites like the Common App is that for the most part, you can anticipate what the prompts are, right? Here on the screen, you'll see a list of 7 different topics for the 2022-2023 essay prompts on the Common App. If any of these essay prompts change between now and the next application cycle that starts in like July or August of this year, you'll be able to see any of these updates on their website. But for the most part, you'll know that these are some of the essay prompts that you can choose to respond to. And the best thing for you to do, right, is to choose a prompt that you would be most comfortable spending your time writing 1, 2, and even 3 drafts for so that you submit the best essay, right? Here, it really does come down to your comfort level or even choosing prompts that you know you've already responded to within your literature or language arts class. Now, like I mentioned, right, for those letter recommendations, there's something called a brag sheet. The brag sheet really is an opportunity for you to humble brag and tell your teachers and your counselors about everything and anything that you do outside of the context that they might know you. So, for example, if you choose your math teacher to write you a letter of recommendation, they might know you within the context of their class, but they might not know what your personal interests are, what you're involved in outside of their class, right? And this brag sheet allows you the opportunity to share more about you and your personal story and your personal involvements so that your math teacher is able to incorporate more information in the letter that they write about you, right? A brag sheet is always a great thing to do and to prepare preemptively so that when you're asking teachers if they'd be willing to be a recommender for you, you hand this to them right off the bat and you don't hold off and sending it to them a little bit late. Common App has an amazing template for you to be able to print out and use, but some of your schools within your guidance counseling offices might already have brag sheets that your school or school district recommends you use. And if that's the case, then I would suggest you use those because your teachers would already likely be accustomed to seeing those in the format and the type of information that they're asking you to share with them. Now, here's another moment where the common data set, if you can find it, becomes really handy for you. Here, for example, we still have information on Georgia Tech, but one of the things that they share for anyone who's accessing this data is the different components of the college application and how relevant they are in determining whether or not a student gets admitted as a part of their incoming class. So here we see a bunch of different categories, both academic and non-academic, and whether or not the college admissions team considers them to be very important to not even considered, right? Here, from your high school transcript, they likely already consider the rigor of your high school record, right? And for them, it's very important. At that same level, right, your academic GPA and your application essay are very, very important in the determining whether or not you get admitted to Georgia Tech. But things that are not really considered would be like your class rank. So for Georgia Tech, it's not really important whether or not you are like number 25 or number 40 in your class, as long as you're able to showcase that you've taken rigorous courses, have a high GPA, and that your application is outstanding, right? When we're looking at non-academic things for Georgia Tech, your extracurricular activities and what you're involved in both within and outside of your high school are really important. It really shapes how the college admission counselor makes a determining decision, right? Whether or not you can convey your character or your personal qualities about you as an individual and not just within an academic context, that's also important. Whether or not you have volunteer or even work experience, that's also very important in their determining factors, right? So most common data sets should share something similar if a college makes this information readily available to you. If you don't find this information in a common data set, it never hurts to ask or even explore the admissions team's website to see what information they share with you. So that way you know that as you're working on a particular application for a college or university, you hone in on the particular aspects that are really, really important in their decision making process. In this common data set, you'll find other information that'll help you kind of figure out how to hone in your application or determine whether a college is a right fit for you. Like I mentioned, right, that would be like the number of students enrolled, how many students graduate, down to the number of students who are eligible for the Pell Grant, which we'll cover in the financial aid presentation, to what required courses they want you to have on your high school transcript when you apply, information on their testing policies, whether or not they require you submit scores, and basic information on their freshman profile. So, like we saw previously, the GPAs, the test scores, of the students who were admitted previously. This will also show you information about like the faculty to student ratio. This will let you know if you have large classes or small classes, and it'll even allow you a glimpse into the number of degrees in particular majors that they offered the last time we recorded their data. Now, you know, right? You probably have a list of 5 to 10 colleges, um, whether these are your safety, match, or even reach colleges, right? Now you'll get a better understanding of what a college application actually entails. There's something that you really need to know that will make your process so much easier. Instead of going to every college or university webpage to look for their specific application link, it's good for you to know that there are 3 major sites that centralize a lot of college applications for you already. There's the Common App, which has about 1,000 colleges and universities around the US states and around the world. There's the Coalition for College, which has about 150 to 200 colleges and universities on their application. And then, if you're interested in going to historically Black college and university, which you don't necessarily need to be a Black or African American student to apply and get admitted, these are the 3 websites that you'll really want to explore, create a profile for, and begin preparing for your college application because they'll help you make the process a lot smoother. It'll help you organize your documents, organize your essay responses, and make sure that you're submitting everything and are still on track to meet the deadlines. Um, if you can't find a college or university, though, on any of these 3 sites, it is most likely that that college has their own specific portal for their applications. In which case, when you're building your list of colleges, you'll want to check off who's on Common App, who's on Coalition for College, or who's on the Common Black College application, and who's not. Because if you know who's not on these 3 main centralized sites, you'll know that it'll be important for you to keep track for yourself all the items that you need to submit for the particular college that's not on these websites. When you are using these websites, it's important to know, right, when you're submitting your college applications, some of these applications might have a fee associated to them. So they'll make you pay in order to be able to submit your college application. And if that's the case, there's multiple ways to be able to get around that application fee. For example, if you were able to take the SAT or ACT on a waiver and didn't have to pay for those exams, they also have waivers for your college applications. There's a national organization that your counselor should be aware of, and that's NACAC, right? And they have waivers for students who don't have the financial means to cover a particular application fee. Coalition for College, which is similar to the Common App, also has their own waivers that you and your counselor fill out so that they can waive the fees to particular colleges. And then, most importantly, your own state, right, whether you live in Georgia or not, likely has a college application month in which the state as a whole, all your counselors, all your post secondary transition advisors or college advisors work together with nonprofits or work with the government to increase the number of students applying to college. In Georgia, this is November for Georgia Applies to College, and sometimes it's even in March in our state. For your state, it'll be a little bit different. It might be in October, it might be in September, and the start of fall semester. But states tend to offer either no fees, or they waive the fees, or they reduce the cost of applications for certain universities in their state during that given week, 2 week, or even month timeframe. Whether or not you're using these centralized websites, right, that allow you to keep track of the deadlines, it's really important for you to know that there's 4 main types of deadlines. And within these 4 main types of deadlines, certain of them, a few of them are restrictive in that when you apply to a certain college, you can no longer apply to another college at the same time. Some of them are binding in that if you get accepted to the college, you commit to attending your first semester or first year. If you change your mind, in given situations, you can back out of that commitment. But for the most part, you commit to a university, right? Within these 4 deadlines, I'll break them down for you. The one that typically comes around the first is the early decision deadline. This is a deadline that, for most colleges, does restrict you from applying to other colleges in that same early decision or priority deadline, right? So, for example, if you apply to Georgia Tech, early decision, you can apply to UGA, early decision, right? You can only apply to one. If you apply early decision to Georgia Tech or UGA, then these are just examples, then you commit to attending there your first year if you get an offer of admissions, right? The second deadline that tends to come around the same month of November is early action. Early action is similar to early decision in that you can apply early, but you're not restricted and kept from applying to other colleges And you're also not committed to that college or university if you get an offer of admission. So you still have the ability to decide whether or not you want to attend there. It just gives you the ability to submit your application as early as possible and get considered for scholarships or financial aid on a first come, first served basis. Now, the deadlines you might be most kind of knowledgeable about would be the regular decision deadlines, which are tend to be from August all the way up until July, and these are just the regular deadlines that you have to submit your application by so you can enroll in a particular semester, whether that's fall or spring semester. And then rolling admissions deadlines are basically a time frame. It's from the day that the application launches to the very last day they can accept an application. They will accept your application and give you a notice of whether or not you're accepted as soon as your application comes in. And they will close their admission cycle when they have more than enough students for their incoming class. Outside of these application deadlines, it's really important for you to know whether or not there are separate deadlines for financial aid or scholarships at a particular college. Because it's not just enough to submit your college application. If you want to be considered for a competitive scholarship, you want to make sure you submit to that or submit your application by that deadline so that you can be taken into consideration and you don't miss out on an opportunity. All right, so here we'll go through this portion a bit quicker. So I'll walk you through the basics of the SAT and ACT and why they're still important in the admissions process at most colleges and universities. So a part of the college application process and college admissions counselors making their decisions is getting an insight into your SAT or ACT scores. Right, these are two standardized entrance exams that measure your aptitude in particular subjects. So it doesn't necessarily measure how good you are at a subject in the moment you take it. It measures your potential to be successful in those subject areas within your first year of college. Now, the ones you might be most used to hearing are the SAT, ACT. One test you might have taken without realizing it is the PSAT. Most high schools tend to enroll their students for it, and you take it during the school day. The PSAT is basically a practice test. It allows you insight into what the SAT is like, right? You're typically recommended that you take the SAT at least once at the end of your junior year or the summer before your senior year, and make sure that you take the exam well before your college application deadline, because you want to have enough time to get your score back and see if you need to take the exam again. The same thing applies for the ACT. Recommended at least take it in your spring of junior year or at least once during the summer leading up to your senior year, and take it again during the fall of your senior year if you need to. Outside of these three exams, the SAT and ACT being the most common for college admissions app, there's also the AccuPlacer exam and the ASVAB, which do similar things. They also measure your aptitude in certain academic and non-academic areas. The AccuPlacer tends to be required of students who didn't take the SAT or ACT or are applying to college well after that they graduated from high school. And the ASVAB is required of students who are interested in getting involved in the military branches of the US. Now, when it comes to choosing the SAT and ACT, one of the great things is that that common data set will let you know what the average score is like, right? And then when you know what the average score is, you can choose an exam that best suits your academic areas of interest or where you are the most successful in. So, for example, the SAT has a reading, a writing, and a language and a math section. Specifically, the math section tests you on arithmetic, algebra 1 and 2, geometry, trigonometry, and data analysis, right? It's about 3 hours in length and it's scored somewhere between a 400 to a 1600. So your score will fall within that range. The ACT has English, math, reading, and science. So if you know you're good at science, you might be inclined to take the ACT. If you know science is not your strong suit, you might be more focused on the SAT. The ACT is just a tad bit shorter. It's 2 hours and 55 minutes, and it is scored on a 1 to 36 scale. So your score will reflect that as well. Choosing the exam that best reflects what subjects you are strong or comfortable in would be the best for you. And also knowing whether or not a college requires them will be really important because these testing policies can trip you up a bit. So I got my slides wrong. In a second, I'll walk you through the testing policies. But as you register for the SAT and ACT exams, it's important to know that they do cost money, but it is possible for you to get the fees waived, especially if you are a student enrolled or eligible for the National School Lunch Program. So if you are on free or reduced lunch, you can automatically receive up to 2 waivers for each exam. So you can get the cost of 2 SAT exams and 2 ACT exams waived. And if you're eligible for these waivers, you then become eligible for the college application waivers that the SAT offers. If you don't know if you're eligible for the National School Lunch Program or you're not on it, your counselor specifically will determine if your family income falls within the guidelines, whether or not you are enrolled in a federal, state, or local program that aids students in low-income families, whether or not your family receives public assistance, lives in subsidized housing, or if you're a ward of the state or an orphan. If you meet any of these eligibility criteria, your counselor will be able to issue you 2 waivers. So when you're registering, right, like I mentioned, you want to make sure you register with more than enough time to receive your scores back. So for the rest of spring semester of 2023, there are 2 SAT exam dates still available to you if you're interested in getting one in your spring semester of junior year or right in the summer of leading up to your senior year. And there are 3 more exams before fall semester of next year for the ACT. Through both of these exams, you'll be able to submit your scores directly to a college or university. They each have their own processes, so make sure to read the instructions correctly. And for both of the exams, you'll find a ton of resources that are free available to you online in your local high school or even your public library. So make sure to explore the study material that are available to you and not necessarily have to spend a bit of money to buy the study materials in textbook form. Now, here are the testing policies I was trying to cover earlier. Each college or university is going to have their own policies, which makes it a little bit difficult if you're not using a centralized site like Common App or Coalition that helps keep track of this for you. But it's really important to know that some colleges still require it. So they'll require you either submit the ACT and or the SAT exam scores, right? Some of them require you to submit all the scores for every single time you took it. So if you took the SAT twice or the ACT twice, they might require you submit both scores. Some colleges and universities are test optional, so they give you the opportunity to decide if submitting your score will be beneficial for your application. If you know your score falls right below the average, at the average, or above the average, you might want to add it, right? It allows the college admissions counselor a bit more insight into your aptitude in academic areas, so it'll help and support your application. If you know you're right below the average by quite a bit, or you just don't want to share your exam scores, you don't have to if they are test optional. If they are test optional or if they're test blind and where they don't require the exam scores for college admissions, you want to pay attention to whether or not they require the exam scores for their scholarships. So some colleges that say we don't need your scores to decide whether or not you can be admitted, they might need your scores if they have competitive scholarships and they use that as a determining factor to decide who gets how much money in scholarships or grants from the university specifically. Okay, so this is actually the end of the presentation. Like I mentioned, right, my name is Cesar Lopez. I'm the Director of Education here at Hope. You can find out more about us and the work that we do at www.leadwithhope.org. Specifically on our education page, you'll find more information on scholarships, resources for immigrant students, our Hope Legacy Scholarship, which is open to students who are involved in our after-school program, and the opportunity for you to get access to free one-on-one advising services. If you have specific questions, you can email info@hopestrong.org.